It started with a quiet morning on my ranch, the sun rising over the hills, birds chirping, and the old wooden bridge stretching peacefully across the lake I'd cared for since my grandfather's time. That bridge wasn't just a piece of wood and nails. It was history. It was the heart of the land. But then the HOA came. Not even from our community, just the nearby luxury resort built 5 years ago. They called it an eyesore, said it ruined the view for their guests. I laughed at first. I mean, who complains about a bridge on private land? A week later, I wasn't laughing. Without warning, the HOA sent contractors to rip it down. No notice, no permission. Just bulldozers and chainsaws staring through memories, snapping timbers like they were nothing. I was furious, but I held back. I wanted to do things the right way. I made calls, filed complaints, but everywhere I turned, someone had been paid off. Their shiny new resort worth over $5.5 million had bought them power. They didn't deserve, so I went quiet. But I wasn't done. They had no idea the lake was more than just water and fish. It was fed by a dam one I controlled, one they didn't even know existed. My grandfather built it before any of them were born. And as the summer heat peaked and resort guests lounged by their infinity pool, sipping cocktails and posting sunset selfies, they had no clue that beneath the surface, everything was about to change. What happens when you push a man too far on his own land with no one to back him up? Let's just say, when that dam opened. It wasn't just water that came rushing through. The dam wasn't some reckless idea I came up with overnight. It had been on the ranch for generations, hidden deep in the trees. Built with stone and sweat by my grandfather and his brothers. Back then, it was meant to store water for dry seasons to keep the land alive. Over the years, I kept it maintained. Because I ever thought I'd need it for anything big, but because it was part of the ranch's soul. A backup plan, a safety net. I never imagined it would become the center of a fight. After they destroyed the bridge, I started digging deeper into who these HOA people really were. Turns out, it wasn't even a real homeowners association like most folks imagine. This was more like a private group of rich investors, mostly tied to that fancy lakeside resort they built Silver Pines Luxury Retreat. They had bought up a few vacation cabins nearby and somehow pushed their influence across the lake. Bit by bit, they tried to take control of the whole area. They didn't want neighbors. They wanted a view, a quiet, polished, fake version of nature. They'd already pushed out to older families before me offered them money, pressured them with zoning issues, even used drone surveillance to track what people were doing on their own land. I never thought they'd mess with me, but after the bridge, I saw their true colors. To them, my ranch wasn't home, it was a problem. It's just a patch of dirt in the way of their next spa expansion. I kept quiet, but I started making plans. I walked the dam every day, checked the flow, measured the pressure, tracked the lake level. Something was coming, and I wasn't the only one feeling it. Even the animals had started acting strange. The days after the bridge was destroyed, it felt like something out of a slow-burning nightmare. Every morning, I'd walk down to where the bridge used to be just a muddy slope, now scattered with splinters and twisted nails. The lake looked still, but underneath, everything was shifting. I could feel it. The tension in the air. The silence of birds that used to sing at dawn. Even my dog, Duke, started sleeping with one ear up and his eyes on the tree line. What bothered me most wasn't the bridge itself, was what it stood for. The resort HOA thought they could do anything. No permission, no conversation, just money and muscle. I heard from a neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, that they were planning a boat dock next right on the edge of my property line. Said they had plans to improve lake access. What they meant was they wanted full control. It wasn't just me they were targeting either. Sarah, a young single mom who ran a local horse stable near the ridge, told me someone from the HOA offered to buy her land. Last month, when she refused, she suddenly got hit with code violations, things like fence height and unauthorized storage structures. The timing wasn't a coincidence. They were trying to push us all out, one by one. At the resort, everything looked perfect: high-end guests, outdoor yoga by the lake, champagne brunches. But behind that polished image was a group of people used to getting what they want. And when they didn't, they made sure life got uncomfortable for those who stood in the way. I still hadn't told anyone about the dam. Not Sarah, not Jenkins. Not even my brother, who used to help me with repairs. I didn't want to involve them. Not yet. Because once that water started moving, there was no turning back. The night the storm rolled in, everything changed. Clouds gathered low over the hills like they were holding a secret. Thunder echoed through the canyon, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. I stood at the edge of the lake, flashlight in hand, watching the water rise inch by inch. The rain wasn't just heavy, it was relentless. Nature was stirring. And for once, it wasn't just me fighting back. Earlier that day, I had overheard two resort workers by the roadside talking about a big weekend event. A celebrity was flying in, some kind of lakefront gala with fireworks and press coverage. They were bragging about how the resort would finally get national attention. I couldn't help but think how clueless they were, posing for cameras while the lake beneath them was about to swell with more water than it could hold. At the same time, the HOA had doubled down. That morning, a notice was taped to my gate, something about unauthorized water flow management. They were trying to come after the dam now, probably had drones scanning it. I could almost laugh at the timing. For years, they didn't even know it was there. Now they wanted to shut it down, just when it was on the edge of bursting. Sarah called me nervous. Said she saw trucks moving equipment near her stable. Jenkins had his water shut off suddenly. I told them both to stay low, stay quiet, and most of all stay off the lake. I checked the dam every hour through the night. The pressure gauge was maxed out. The emergency spillway was holding for now. But if the rain didn't let up by morning, nature was going to finish what the HOA had started. And I wasn't sure anyone was ready for what came next. By sunrise, the storm hadn't let up. The lake had swallowed the lower path completely, and the dam's overflow channel was roaring like a river. I barely slept, pacing the floor, boots soaked, clothes sticking to my back. But it wasn't the rain that had my stomach twisted, it was the black SUV parked near the fence line. It showed up just before dawn, engine running, windows tinted. Two men stepped out, not locals. Suits, polished shoes, the kind that don't belong on muddy ranch roads. One of them had a clipboard, the other just stood there, arms crossed, staring at the dam through binoculars. They weren't from the HOA, this was something else. And that's when it hit me. Someone had reported the dam to the authorities. I followed them at a distance through the trees, careful not to be seen. I couldn't hear much, but I caught one phrase, potential liability zone. My heart sank. If they declared the dam a threat to the resort, they'd use it to force an emergency shutdown. They'd claim it was for public safety, but I knew better. This wasn't about safety. This was about power. If they shut the dam down, the lake would be theirs. And everything my family built would dry up with it. As I made my way back to the ranch, my phone buzzed. Sarah. She sounded panicked. "There's a drone over the barn," she whispered. "I think they're watching everyone now." Then the call cut off. The storm, the pressure, the surveillance, it was all building to something. The lake wasn't just water anymore. It was the last line holding everything together. And now, with outside officials circling and the HOA pushing harder than ever, the ranch wasn't just under threat. It was surrounded, and the dam, it was running out of time. The pressure gauge hit red just before noon. I stood at the dam's control hatch, soaked to the bone, hands trembling on the lever. The rain had slowed, but the damage was done. Lake was swollen beyond anything I'd seen in my lifetime. Logs floated like matchsticks, and the water was nearly cresting over the ridge. I had two choices: open the floodgates in a controlled release, or risk the entire dam bursting on its own. Then came the final blow. A chopper appeared overhead, circling low. Not news media. Not rescue. It was marked with the resort's logo. Moments later, a message crackled through a megaphone. Step away from the dam. You are trespassing unregulated land. Regulated? My jaw locked. They had filed a claim through some emergency zoning loophole, using the state officials from that morning. They were trying to take legal control of the dam. They thought a megaphone would scare me off my own land. They didn't know the dam was still registered under my grandfather's private infrastructure permit. They hadn't done their homework, but I had. I pulled the lever. The gates opened with a deep, thunderous groan. Water exploded out with the force of a freight train, ripping through the valley, rushing toward the lake's far end where the resort shimmered like a glass jewel. I didn't want destruction. I wanted justice. But nature doesn't always play fair. Within minutes, the lower levels of Silver Pines were underwater, docks torn away. Tennis courts flooded, the lakeside bungalows swept into the trees like toys. The flood revealed something buried deep beneath the resort's foundation: concrete ruins. Rusted barrels, warning signs half covered in mud. Not just an old structure, a toxic dump site. The resort had been built on contaminated land, and they knew. They tried to cover it up. In the end, the dam didn't just wash out their lies, it uncovered them in the days that followed. Everything changed. News vans rolled in before the water even dried. Not because of the flood, but because of what the flood uncovered. The toxic waste site made headlines across the state. Environmental officials confirmed that the land had been part of a decades-old industrial dump zone, hidden under forged reports and buried deep beneath the resort. Turns out, the HOA board knew from the beginning. They built Silver Pines anyway, risking everything for profit. That lake they loved so much. It had been slowly absorbing those toxins for years. The resort was shut down within a week. Lawsuits started piling up. Investors pulled out. And the fancy board members who once ordered me around from their decks were now being questioned by federal investigators. Their empire crumbled, not because of me, but because of their own secrets. As for the ranch, the dam held. The flood cleared the excess, but the structure stood strong, just like my grandfather built it. Sarah's stable is safe now, and the zoning violations against her were quietly dropped. Jenkins got his water restored, and we all started looking out for each other a little more. Sometimes it takes a storm to remind people what matters. I rebuilt the bridge. Simple this time, nothing fancy. Just enough to cross, to remember. The lake's calmer now, the water clearer than it's been in years. Duke still runs along the banks, tail wagging, like nothing ever happened. In the end, they tried to erase what was never theirs. But the land has a way of remembering. And sometimes, when the right line gets crossed, nature answers louder than any man ever could. That's the story of how the HOA tried to take my ranch and how the lake took it back.